Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cherry Becker's Digital Journeys podcast. My name is Jim Holman, and I'm pleased to host today's episode, the second of a three-part series about continuous improvement. In this session, we'll talk about the use of a model to baseline your organization's improvements maturity and help clarify attributes to advance your continuous improvement practice. In this session, I'm joined by my colleague, Steve Holliday. We're both part of Cherry Becker's digital advisory practice, in which we guide our clients forward in their transformation journeys. Steve, thanks for joining me.
It's a privilege to be here.
So, Steve, you and I talked about business process maturity in a podcast last fall. Can you remind our listeners about the process maturity model, PMM? We love our acronyms, and the importance of the process maturity model.
Sure thing, Jim. If we think about business process maturity, we should think about a continuum of practices ranging from beginner to advanced. The process maturity model will break this continuum into 5 different levels. Each level has a verbal description. Common labels for each level are initial, repeatable, defined, managed, and optimized. We're going to break these down just a little bit further. So at level 1, the initial stage, the organization has begun to identify its processes and the steps involved in each process. Efforts tend to be more ad hoc and individualized. Processes are inconsistent, and sometimes results are difficult to predict. At level 2, or repeatable, the organization has identified its processes, but the steps involved in each process are not yet standardized. Work is stabilized in a repeatable way within local work units. At level 3, or defined, the organization has standardized the steps involved in each process and has begun to manage processes across functional boundaries. Processes are documented. Then as we move to level 4, or managed, the organization has standardized all processes within the organization. They're measured and controlled, so the processes are measured and under control. And management of these processes may still be a little weak or developing, mostly as we see either a lack of focus on improvement or lack of training and facilitated leadership. Then at level 5, or optimized, the optimized organization will have strong management skills along with the effective tools to help them manage their processes effectively so that they can achieve their goals faster than ever before, while also reducing costs associated with running these operations. So the importance of this process maturity model is really found in the baseline that it helps establish, helping that organization understand where it is along that continuum, as well as giving a little bit more insight into where it can move and the advancement that it can provide.
Steve, this is really interesting, and it's also a bit academic. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So I'd say, for organizations that may be a little less familiar with continuous improvement and the supporting underlying processes, this framework does need more detail. And Cherry Becker has created a maturity model intended to provide this additional detail to help organizations with their own self-assessments. We'll be discussing this model a little bit further here, and we'll provide additional details on where to find this assessment tool later in the podcast. This general model provides level 1 through 5 attributes for critical administrative practices in areas such as people, process, technology, data, analytics, and risk. We have also developed more targeted models for areas such as supply chain and manufacturing operations. These models are available on request for organizations looking to baseline these functions. All these models were developed using our experience helping companies improve. So let's talk about the first one. First one's people. We're really looking at training here and tracking the advancement of training practices. If people don't know how to use the systems and tools for improvement or that are being used to operate the business, then that's something that's going to create issues in having repeatable processes. For the second area, for processes, we look at a formal definition the development, and then the improvement of those processes that help the business achieve better results and better outcomes. For the technology dimension, we look at the evolution of the technology platforms supporting the businesses. Business may start out operating on spreadsheets. As it grows, it needs to add systems that help them do some more advanced functions. Maybe sometimes there could be some systems and some processes that operate offline on spreadsheets. And then as they advance and the requirements become more acute, then they may be looking at the need for more fully integrated platforms. When we look at or consider data, we look at the disciplines needed to manage the data and the data quality and consistency. Why? Well, it's needed for accurate execution of process, but also needed for good reporting and analysis. In immature stages, data is inconsistent and requires a lot of manual cleanup in order to make it useful for analytics, which is the next area. As we think about analytics, we look at the advancement of capabilities from offline, maybe manual reports, or maybe we have to go out and collect data. And we move and advance into more of an online capability, and our reporting is timely. It meets business needs on timing, as well as we've made the tools available for, I'll say, citizen analysis, with more ad hoc analytic capabilities. And the last dimension, the last area that we look at is risk. We look at the evolution of risk management practice that helps support a growing and a more sophisticated organization as the growth or the need for that sophistication. And so really then, again, kind of back to the reason, why do we develop this? It's because the 5 parts that I just talked through before really don't provide a lot of prescriptive detail as to, okay, well, what is evident in each of these different levels? And so we've taken those levels and we've broken down in a little bit more detail into each of these areas. Just like, in the model that we're not presenting on this podcast is the supply chain model or the manufacturing operations model. We've broken those into more detail to help organizations understand where they are, where they fit, and what are some big areas of opportunity for improvement. Which is to differentiate a little bit. We are trying to talk about kind of a rough assessment. We'll talk a little bit more in the next podcast about a more detailed approach. So we would encourage our listeners to go ahead and take this assessment. Or if you're looking for some assistance, we're happy to provide that. Just ask at no cost. Planning for improvement is critical because it begins with an understanding of the starting point. Please reach out to us today to get started. There is no commitment here.
Yeah, Steve, with those continuous improvement, as we've talked about, and process improvement models, understanding where you are, and really one of the key areas there is what's the next step? What's the next stage? I think organizations get trapped looking at level 5. They start chasing perfect and get frustrated. And I think having organizations work with you and your team to understand where they are and understand those incremental iterative improvements can really bring results.
For sure. I mean, there's no question that to jump from a level 3 to a 5 or a 2 to 5, it just can't. It's a very difficult leap, right? You need to bite this off into chunks and stepwise work your way forward.
Steve, thank you again today for the discussion on business process maturity and the process maturity model. Stay tuned for part 3 of the series. Please reach out to any one of us through the contact information listed wherever you're listening to this podcast, or go to cbh.com/digital. Thanks again, as always, for tuning into Cherry Bekaert's Digital Journeys podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and follow along so you don't miss the next episode of this series on how to optimize operations for your organization.